Imagine stepping through a portal into a world of glossy magazine covers, swirling cigarette smoke, and glittering social circles that orbit around the most breathtaking penthouses in Paris, the most exclusive enclaves in Palm Beach, and the most storied estates tucked high in the Swiss hills. You're entering the universe of Gloria Guinness, a name that once commanded the attention of the international elite. She was born in a modest hospital in Guadalajara, Mexico, but her destiny was to ascend into aristocratic circles spanning Europe, Africa, and beyond. Embraced by towering fortunes and headlining scandal sheets, she lived multiple lives within a single lifetime. Her presence electrified any room she entered, yet behind the polished facade lurked a hidden tapestry of reinvention, heartbreak, and intrigue. One moment, she was the suave fashion columnist who could hold court with royals and movie stars. The next, she was dogged by whispers of espionage. She flaunted lavish couture, wrote witty essays for Harper's Bazaar, and maintained deep friendships with some of the most influential personalities of her day, until those same personalities, like Truman Capote, exposed her in ways that changed everything. This is her story, dramatic, glamorous, and marked by a singular quest to outrun the shadows of her past. The year is 1912, and the place is Guadalajara, Mexico, at that time a city on the edge of immense social upheaval. Revolution was in the air. Dynastic privilege was about to clash with a tide of unrest. In the midst of this tension, little Gloria Rubio y Alatorre drew her first breath on August 27th in a modest hospital, an unremarkable building compared to the sprawling haciendas her ancestors had once owned. Her father, José Rafael Rubio Torres, was a progressive journalist with lofty ideals. He believed words and ideas could shape society, but he placed his bets on the wrong side of the Mexican Revolution, supporting President Francisco Madero, who was brutally ousted in 1913. Suddenly, the family became targets. They fled Mexico, crossing into San Antonio, Texas, seeking refuge and new beginnings. But in 1916, tuberculosis claimed José's life at the young age of 35, leaving Gloria's mother, Maria Luisa, nearly penniless and with 3 children to raise in a foreign land. Gloria was only 4 at the time. She likely couldn't grasp the enormity of losing her father or the precarious nature of the family's finances. She simply knew that life was becoming one shift after another. By the time the Cristero War erupted back in Mexico in the late 1920s, the Rubios were pulled once again into upheaval, forced to relocate to the chaos of Mexico City. Early years, she was home tutored and she spoke Spanish, French, and English, with an easy fluency that would later dazzle the upper echelons of European society. It was almost as if adversity had burned into her the ability to adapt, to transform herself into whatever she needed to be. That skill would serve her well through multiple marriages, transatlantic moves, and the glamorous yet perilous social climbing she mastered over the decades to come. At 20, she made what might have seemed like a practical marriage, Jacobus Hendrik Franciscus Franz Schultens, a Dutch manager at a sugar refinery in Veracruz. The wedding took place in Mexico City's Registro Civil on May 15, 1933. She was young, radiant, eager for stability. He was balding, somewhat dull but solid enough in the eyes of her family, certainly more reliable than the uncertain drift that had characterized her childhood. But the spark between them was minimal. The union fizzled within a year. They separated, finalizing their divorce in 1935. In a pattern that would repeat itself, Gloria wasted no time reinventing her circumstances. By the time the ink on the divorce papers dried, she was already casting her eye toward more aristocratic horizons. Her second marriage was positively cinematic. Gloria wed a German count, Franz Egon Maria Meinrad Alois, Heinrich von Fürstenberg-Herdringen, a striking aristocrat, 14 years her senior, with a lineage that traced back to Westphalian nobility. They lived in Paris and Madrid, a life of parties and continental sophistication. In 1936, she gave birth to their daughter Dolores, followed by a son, Franz Egon, Jr., in 1939. From the outside, it appeared an enviable arrangement. The exotic Mexican beauty married into old-world nobility. Yet war was creeping ever closer. By the late 1930s, the rumble of conflict had grown deafening. Franz Egon's aloofness and the complexities of a Europe careening into World War II weighed heavily on the marriage. By 1940, they had parted ways. Gloria found herself once again unmoored, simultaneously anxious and excited about the next chapter in her life. She wasn't one to linger in regret. She always moved forward at breakneck speed. That velocity propelled her to Cairo in 1942, a city bursting with intrigue, espionage, and desert romance under the scorching sun. Here, fate introduced her to Prince Ahmad Fakhri Bey, a portly yet jovial Egyptian royal tied by blood to King Farouk. The setting was irresistible: sparkling receptions on the banks of the Nile, lavish banquets with the country's elite, the potent aroma of spices and perfumes in the air. When they married that same year, the ceremony was as dramatic as any Hollywood epic. She arrived in a silk gown, exuding the refined mystique of a woman whose life seemed to skip from one aristocratic circle to the next. Despite the pageantry, their marriage proved rocky. Prince Ahmad gambled colossal sums, boasting an appetite for opulent risk-taking that clashed with Gloria's carefully crafted elegance. By 1949, rumors of his infidelities and mounting debts tore the marriage apart. Yet again, Gloria exited the relationship stage left, determined to land on her feet in even grander fashion. Her fourth and final marriage would be the pinnacle of her social ascent. On April 6, 1951, in Antibes, France, a locale famed for artistic glamour, she wed Thomas Lowell Evelyn Bulkley Guinness, known to most simply as Lowell. He was practically British aristocracy incarnate, a war hero, decorated RAF pilot, a member of Parliament, and heir to the Guinness brewing fortune. Lowell's bank account was said to be worth £20 million in 1951, which, when adjusted for modern inflation, shoots well above £600 million. That money underwrote a fantasy lifestyle that included a historic mansion in Paris, Hôtel Lambert on the Ile Saint-Louis, a Lake Geneva chalet, a dreamlike Palm Beach estate, and a 350-foot yacht charmingly named The Three Friends. If ever there was a moment that defined Gloria as an international style icon, it was during these years. She dazzled at every gathering, clad in Balenciaga Dior and later Yves Saint Laurent. She became a fixture in the columns of society newspapers and the subject of envy everywhere she went. Yet behind the diamonds and couture was a woman whose tumultuous past was never far away. She began writing for Harper's Bazaar in 1963, contributing pithy articles on style and femininity. A hallmark piece, The Art of Being a Woman, championed minimalism. She confessed that sometimes she'd rely on a single Balenciaga dress through an entire social season, an audacious statement, given the era's obsession with variety in couture. But to peers, she was equal parts muse and enigma, a shapeshifter who had lived in half a dozen countries, spoken multiple languages, and married men as different as a Dutch sugar refinery manager and an Egyptian prince. The further she rose, the more alluring and inscrutable she became. Inevitably, The swirling rumors about Gloria's origins and activities also escalated. She had a habit of embellishing her past, telling the press that her father died fighting bandits, that her mother had scrubbed floors to feed them. Friends like Elsa Maxwell found her tall tales romantic, but they also fueled suspicion that Gloria was spinning a glamorous but false narrative. World War II gossip was particularly damning. She'd lived at the Ritz in Madrid from 1940 to 1942, at a time when the Spanish capital was brimming with double agents, Nazi sympathizers, and cunning socialites trading secrets like currency. People whispered that Gloria was an informant, passing tidbits to the Nazis, or perhaps to Franco's regime. Aline Griffith, later known as the Countess of Romanones, claimed in her memoir, The Spy War Red, that Gloria was an agent codenamed G, who strutted around in a sable coat while delivering carefully packaged intel. Gloria, of course, brushed it off as fiction, but the rumor trailed her for the rest of her days. Even as scandal brewed around her, her personal life remained a captivating soap opera. Consider the 1955 marriage of her daughter Dolores to Lowell's son Patrick. Yes, her stepdaughter and stepson were joined in holy matrimony. Though Dolores and Patrick were not biologically related, society columns had a field day with the family entanglement, and dinner party chatter soared. The wedding took place in Paris and signaled the union of two branches of aristocratic families, albeit in a manner that left many onlookers intrigued, if not downright scandalized. 3 grandchildren came from that union: Lowell Patrick, born 1957, Maria Alexandra, 1959, and Victoria, 1960. Gloria was overjoyed to be a grandmother, yet she couldn't have. Perhaps the single most devastating event was the plane crash that claimed the life of her beloved son, Lance, in 1972. Her entirely escaped the raised eyebrows that followed that match. As the years passed, she crossed paths with some of the most influential and creative minds of the 20th century. She was famously in the orbit of Truman Capote, part of his bevy of socialite swans, those elegant, moneyed women whose gossip he collected and recast into literature. For a time she was enthralled by Capote's wit, and he was dazzled by her layered identity, a woman of so many reinventions that she herself might have lost count. This friendship would end in a public cataclysm in November 1975, when Esquire printed Capote's La Côte Basque, 1965, a short story that was effectively an excerpt from his never-completed novel, Answered Prayers. Thinly disguised portraits of real people filled its pages, and Gloria was rendered as Lady Ina Coolberth, a Mexican beauty with an ostensible whore's past and a shadowy Nazi liaison record. Livid, Gloria cut ties with Capote. With her typical flair, she phoned him to spew insults, lambasting his betrayal. It was a heartbreak that stung more than most because it showed her how quickly even her carefully curated circle could turn on her. Yet for all this sparkle and scandal, Gloria's life was also scarred by personal tragedies she seldom aired publicly. The earliest was the death of her father back in 1916, which she barely remembered. She spent a good portion of her early life watching her mother do whatever it took to survive, from selling off personal trinkets to leaning on distant relatives. That sense of precariousness of living close to the brink never truly left her. The violence of the Cristero War in the late 1920s left a mark as well. She once spoke of cowering in a corner with her mother and siblings, listening to the crack of gunfire echo through the hills. These memories, though rarely mentioned, forged her intense aversion to chaos and shaped her hunger for stability and control. Motherhood also brought heartbreak. Her daughter Dolores experienced crushing sadness in 1965, a year that would sear itself into Gloria's psyche. Dolores was married to Patrick Guinness by then, and on September 5th of that year, Patrick, only 34, died in a car crash near Ruesch-le-Con, Switzerland. He lost control of his Alfa Romeo Giulietta Spider after a night of drinking, and the collision was fatal. Dolores was pregnant with their third child, Victoria. The news reached Gloria in Paris, sending her into a spiral of grief and guilt. She was said to have fainted when the phone call came, and for once the famously unflappable Socialite let the tears flow. She wore black for a year, a visible statement of mourning in a world where she typically led trends rather than followed them. Dolores carried on, eventually delivering her baby, but the heartbreak weighed on Gloria. For all her wealth and glamour, she couldn't shield her loved ones from the randomness of tragedy. Another source of sorrow lay with her son, Franz Egon Jr., who never quite found the stability she hoped for him. After a marriage and divorce to the glamorous Gunilla von Bismarck in 1970, he drifted toward obscurity. He eventually married Adelina Kuberian in 1978 and settled into a quieter life in Munich. Gloria confided in close friends like Mirella Agnelli that it pained her to see her son, a descendant of nobility, living out a less than extraordinary future. Her stoic facade might have fooled many, but behind it, she worried incessantly about her children's fortunes and how they might reflect on her carefully curated legacy. By the time the 1970s rolled around, Gloria began to show signs of physical and emotional strain. She suffered from insomnia, a restlessness that kept her pacing in the early morning hours. She chain-smoked Gauloises, up to 40 a day, until her lungs begged for mercy. Her once robust figure shrank to around 110 pounds, and she found herself frequently at the doors of exclusive clinics, seeking the latest therapies for exhaustion or anxiety. One such therapy was administered by Dr. Paul Nehans, who famously championed cellular therapy injections, claiming they could rejuvenate patients at a near miraculous level. Gloria hoped these treatments might restore her energy, but instead, she found only a temporary lift before sinking back into listlessness. Rumors swirled that she popped barbiturates to sleep, chased them with Valium to maintain composure, and then fueled the day with espresso and cigarettes. Hers was a precarious balancing act, and close friends sensed that her glamorous veneer was wearing thin. Then came the year 1980. She had been living in Villa Zanrock in Eppelinge, Switzerland, an avant-garde home of concrete and glass perched high above Lake Geneva. For all its modern beauty, the villa felt somewhat cold, an architectural statement lacking warmth. But perhaps it mirrored her state of mind, regal, imposing, and increasingly remote. On November 9th, she woke up early, as was her habit, slipped on a silk kimono, and prepared her usual espresso. Moments later, she felt an excruciating pain in her chest. Collapsing onto a chaise longue in her bedroom, she tried to catch her breath but couldn't. Her housekeeper discovered her, eyes closed, a cigarette still burning between her fingers. The official cause was a massive heart attack, almost certainly linked to decades of heavy smoking and the stress that had dogged her for so long. The fact that pills were found, Valium, sleeping aids, and barbiturates, quickly triggered rumors of suicide. Close friends like CZ Guest speculated that Gloria had chosen her exit, deciding she would rather slip away than face the indignities of aging any further. But Lowell Guinness, away on business in London, staunchly denied it, insisting that Gloria had sounded perfectly content during their last phone call. Some might argue that she was indeed content in her own paradoxical way. After all, Gloria had lived an extraordinary life. She had seized it by the lapels, flirted with scandal, soared to heights of wealth and fame, and maintained her composure through personal calamities that might have broken a less resilient spirit. Her funeral took place on November 12th at Église Saint-Pierre in Espionage. It was an understated 30-minute ceremony, attended by about 50 mourners. Dolores was there, still haunted by memories of her husband's crash. Franz Egon Jr. appeared, quiet and withdrawn. Lowell stood stoically, gazing at the coffin, no doubt recalling their travels, and shared decades of lavish living. Even some iconic figures from the fashion world, like Hubert de Givenchy, made the journey to pay their respects. After the service, Gloria was buried in Laussane's Bois de Vaux cemetery, in a plot beside where Lowell would eventually join her. The headstone bore her birth name and her married name, Gloria Rubio Guinness, 1912 to 1980, a simple black granite slab that gave no hint of the kaleidoscopic life she had led. In the days and weeks that followed, the international press delivered their epitaphs. Women's Wear Daily declared it the end of an era, paying tribute to her elegance and to how she had refined the art of living well. Detractors sniped that she was a pretender, a myth maker who built her reputation on half-truths and illusions. Admirers countered that she was a woman of her time, indeed ahead of it, who navigated a male-dominated world using every tool at her disposal: beauty, wit, adaptability, and resourcefulness. Her will reportedly bequeathed $2 million to charity, while her cherished jewels went to Dolores and her art collection to Lowell. And so concluded one of the 20th century's most fascinating narratives, a woman who, in one lifetime, inhabited roles as diverse as refugee, countess, princess, society columnist, rumored spy, and international style icon. Standing at about 5'6", her slender frame once adorned with diamonds and couture, she had commanded entire rooms with a raised eyebrow or a subtle smile. Yet in the end, her body gave out under the weight of so many cigarettes, so many transatlantic flights, so many private heartbreaks,